All in all, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. All right, so let's get this out of the way right from the get-go, because it's the one thing that every reviewer focuses on, and it's honestly been beaten to death. Yes, Evan looks old. Uncomfortably so. But before I went in to see Dear Evan Hansen, I told myself that I needed to get over that right from the get-go, or I was gonna miss a bunch of other aspects of the film. Besides, when it comes to movies or musicals in general, I'm typically willing to suspend my disbelief. To a point. Curtains up, run crew, because it's time to dive into the latest release in this Broadway movie musical renaissance, Dear Evan Hansen. Was it the flaming, cringe-worthy, mouth-gaping in disbelief movie that would finally dethrone 2019's Cats for the weirdest use of CGI? Well, that's what we're gonna attempt to find out together right now, because honestly, I'm still trying to come to terms with how I felt about this movie. So for those of you who don't know, Dear Evan Hansen follows a 17-year-old high school senior named, you guessed it, Evan Hansen. The story really begins when one of his classmates, named Connor Murphy, takes his own life with a note that Evan wrote, which was addressed to himself, and it was in Connor's possession when they found his body. His parents then believe that Connor wrote the note for Evan, and in a misguided attempt to ease the grieving family's pain, and also to find his own place where he fits in, Evan fabricates a lie that he was actually close friends with Connor. Then the snowball starts rolling from there until it inevitably runs into a wall and explodes. The show dominated the 2017 Tony Awards, launched Ben Platt to superstardom, and really ignited the popularity of composing duo Pasek and Paul. But as the years continued to pass, and more people started to analyze the show closer, the more problems started to get identified. Specifically with the ending, which I'll dive into later in the video, but basically it's one of the biggest points of contention with this show. Let's just, right now, have a talk about the initial thoughts that I have. Now, I'm sure you're here to either watch me commiserate a horrible movie-going experience, or you want to see me ruthlessly tear into this film the same way I would with a Cats, or with a Mamma Mia. Because I don't know how, but I feel like there's this perception of me that I just actively go into stuff like this looking to have a bad time. So then I can come here and rant for your entertainment dollar. So I want to clear this up right from the get-go, okay? I spent $12 on this thing. So I made sure that when I went into this, I did it with an open mind. I actively avoided reading any reviews on it, which was very difficult because some of those thumbnails were very tempting to click on, but I did it so that I wouldn't be swayed. And I'm sure it's gonna come as a pretty big shock to many of you, but I honestly didn't hate it. Again, I'm still not entirely sure how I felt about it, and that's gonna be our journey throughout this thing, but I can tell you with certainty that I didn't hate it the same way I hated Cats. For the most part, the casting was stellar, and it would be the exact casting that I would choose for a film rendition of this show. Julianne Moore as Evan's mom? Perfect. The entirety of the Murphy family? Loved it. Although I will admit, after hearing Amy Adams sing again on screen, it made me feel really old when I realized that the last time we heard that was in Enchanted, which was 14 years ago. No, it can't be. It can't be. I'm not old. I'm not old. The Murphy family is actually one of the best things in this movie, and I really think it's the glue that holds the film together, specifically with Requiem, which honestly I think is one of the best songs Pasek and Paul have ever written. And the way it's conveyed in the film hurts even more, because it didn't need to be as overly dramatic or theatrical as it did on the stage, super exaggerated. It's much more raw in the film, so by having the camera close and seeing the characters isolated in their different environments, in my eyes, drawing on my own experiences, it made it a much more intimate feeling, and it was one that I really identified with. The pacing, the cinematography, the characters' internal journeys throughout the song, they were handled beautifully. Out of everything that got changed in the movie, I think the portrayal of Elena is probably the biggest. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if memory serves me correctly, Elena in the show is really nothing more than this overachiever who sees Connor's death as a way for her to gain more personal validation at his expense, to put it bluntly. If I remember, she was pretty two-dimensional, and there's no real depth to who she is or how she really is connected to the story going on between Evan and the Murphys, the entirety. But without diving into too many spoilers for all of you who want to see it, in the movie, they change her character from just being this peppy class president to actually dealing with anxiety herself. And I think this really helps in not only giving her a better connection to Evan, but also in highlighting that depression isn't the same for everyone. Because a lot of times, people generalize that depression is just one way, and that people who look happy aren't prone to it, when in reality, it's just that they hide it well. And in always putting on that happy face, it reaches a point where it becomes incredibly exhausting and demoralizing. And this is really portrayed well in the new song that Pasek and Paul wrote for the movie. Now, I'll admit that when I heard there were going to be a couple new songs for the film, I had horrible flashbacks to Beautiful Ghosts, which was just completely unmotivated, felt entirely different from the rest of the songs that were in Cats, and honestly, I think it served no purpose other than give me Oscar, please! But the new song, The Anonymous Ones, is a home run, and one that I honestly think they should add to the stage version, because it just takes Elena from this unrelatable character and humanizes her on a different level, while also telling the people listening to the song that, the ones who put on those happy faces to hide the hurt or the disappointment or the anxiety down below, that it's not weird to feel that way. And honestly, that you're not alone in feeling like that. But these are just a few in an extensive list of changes that they made for the film, a few of which were pretty baffling and I think actually hindered the story more than helped it. The best case that I can think of comes with Evan's cousin, Jared. It goes without saying that Dear Evan Hansen is a pretty dramatic show, and with how heavy the stage version is, the moments of levity are crucial for letting the audience catch their breath. This is the main job of Jared, I think, is to be the comedic relief. But in the film, dude basically doesn't exist. And what happened for me as a result of this and getting rid of those comedic breaks is that once the 1 hour mark came around, I stopped writing my notes and I just went, God, I'm just really tired and super bummed out. And I think that really falls on director Steven Chbosky's approach. I've never seen Perks of Being a Wallflower, which he directed, but I figure it's safe to assume that in that movie, there had to be some moments that allowed the audience to laugh. In Dear Evan Hansen, everything from the color grading, to the camera angles, to the performances, to the length of shots, to the musical underscoring, just screams super, super dramatic. I mean, granted, the stage show isn't this laugh-a-minute romp, but it still had those lighter moments that make the more serious moments more gratifying because they're earned.
while also creating a more dynamic story thanks to the tonal shifts in the songs. In the movie, it's just 11 o'clock number after 11 o'clock number, and you can only take so many 11 o'clock numbers before you go, oh my god, is it 11:30 yet? The pacing is the one place that I feel the stage version is better, because it allows for those variations through its song structure, separating the dramatic songs with the lighter, fast-tempoed songs in between. The film messes up this structure in the way it cuts these lighter songs out. In the stage musical, things get kicked off with a bang, with the absolute, well, for lack of a better word, banger, Anybody Have a Map. This number's important not only in how it introduces the audience to where each of these characters are in their lives when we meet them, but in how it also grants the audience permission to laugh. Anytime I write or direct, I know that the first scene and those first few pages are crucial for setting audience expectations of what they can look forward to and how they interact with the piece. And this is why Anybody Have a Map is a great way to start Dear Evan Hansen, because it lets audiences know, okay, we're gonna be dealing with some serious shit, but it's okay to laugh every now and then. In a huge misfire of, I think, trying to evoke that same feeling that audiences got when The Greatest Show just blared over the speakers for Greatest Showman. You know, that and then I start crying into my popcorn because I'm like, oh my god, it's gonna be good. The film cuts out Anybody Have a Map and instead opens with waving through a window. Big mistake. Not only because of how it sets the tone for what's going to become an unrelentingly dramatic story, but also in how it took out one of the show's main themes. The fact that parents don't always know what to do. By getting rid of that number, the track listing now goes waving through a window directly to For Forever. So now we're about 15 or 20 minutes into this film, and all we've gotten are really somber, powerful, sad songs. So this means that when Sincerely Me shows up, it's super jarring and out of place because it's the high energy and funny musical number that comes out of seemingly nowhere. And it's made even more out of place by their decision to cut basically all of the breather room songs, all the higher tempo, higher energy songs in between, like To Break in a Glove and Good for You. So basically, after Sincerely Me, it goes to Requiem, to If I Could Tell Her, to the anonymous ones, to You Will Be Found. The slow pacing also indirectly makes Evan's act of continuing to lie look premeditated because there's so much space in between each lie, as opposed to the stage version where the lie grows so fast because Evan is always terrified that he's going to get busted. It's just dramatic song after dramatic song, and it slows the movie down to the point where I was just waiting for Persephone to hop out and say, "Anybody want a drink?" I will say that the orchestrations are superb. And regardless of your feelings towards the story, there's no denying that there's a reason it's always been the songs that make Dear Evan Hansen resonate with people. And I think that just speaks to the power of Pasek and Paul's music. Because when it came to the story, I honestly didn't care. And this is where I inevitably have to dive in to Ben Platt's performance. I want to preface by saying he was Evan Hansen. He's an incredible talent, and he's really great at hitting those high notes. But, man, he just really felt out of place. And it's weird because Ben Platt has been in movies. But I was worried that having been connected to portraying Evan in such a specific way, it would become a hindrance more than a strength that he had played him before. Because that theatrical performance that he had gotten so used to doing, it wasn't going to translate well to the screen. And it's not a knock on Ben Platt, it's just one of those things where when you're doing a performance at that heightened of a scale and that exaggerated, it becomes habitual. and hard to do it any other way. So, in comparison to his more screen-seasoned co-stars, all of whom were approaching these roles for the first time with no prior assumptions, they felt a little more dropped into the story for me. It's the classic Laurence Olivier, Marilyn Monroe, Prince and the Showgirl conundrum that I always like to bring up in these situations, where the stylings of the stage and the screen stars clash. The best example would come from comparing the songs Requiem to For Forever. Requiem hit me a lot harder because it was the one that felt the most genuine. It featured all of the screen stars who used the song as a vehicle for action and really sold it with their subtleties. They weren't selling it for an audience, they were just living in the space, and it felt like I was living life through their characters. Compare this to For Forever, where I felt like it was Ben Platt performing to me. The turmoil was dramatically heightened in an unnaturally seeming way, both physically and emotionally, because Ben Platt was still in that habit of playing to the back of the house. Because it's what he's used to. It's his performance that he did for 7 years. When you have 7 years of certain character quirks or theatricality-based physical attributes that have become so ingrained in you, you can't just unlearn that in the span of a few months. So regardless of the fact that, yes, he looks older than all of his co-stars, I actually think that the biggest reason the role should have gone to someone else was because he already had his rendition made up before he went into filming. No matter what happened, he was always going to feel like he was playing for an audience. And because of that, it just didn't mesh. So the way I see it is, yes, Ben Platt defined the role on the stage, but someone else should have defined it on the screen. And somehow, the over-theatricality makes Evan come off as even more of a sociopath than he already was on the stage. Which leads us to one of the biggest problems I always had with the show. Evan gets off way too easy. And while I do feel like the creators made a lot of appropriate changes that give the show a better ending in the film version than you get in the musical, it still doesn't fix that problem of Evan basically getting off scot-free. I've just been thinking about it all day as to why the ending just didn't feel right. I think it's because, in the film especially, they want audiences to walk away feeling sympathy for Evan, which is an absolutely huge ask, because sure, he was justified in doing what he did, but I mean, so was Thanos when he said he wanted to wipe out half of the galaxy. I've always been in the boat that Evan isn't actually supposed to be the hero of Dear Evan Hansen, but rather that he's supposed to be the villain. And it's supposed to be a cautionary tale where you don't want to wind up like him. But the movie really tries to make him out to be the good guy, going so far as to cut out all of the scenes from the show that, for lack of a better word, paint him as the asshole that he is. So yes, while the movie doesn't exonerate him to the extent that the stage show does, I still get the feeling that the creators want me to walk away going, that Evan, man, he sure turned it around there in the end. I'm happy he learned his lesson. He's a good kid. He's just in an awkward spot. And I think that they just want me to have this different perception of Evan than the one that the story has led me to naturally, which is that he's just a sociopath. But as always, those are just my thoughts, and there are bound to be a lot of things I missed while trying to write in a notepad in a completely dark theater. So let's take a look at what you folks in the run crew thought of it. Amazingly, with how last minute and ask it was for your feedback, your commentary blew me away. I guess I'm still just really happy you're here and that we're able to do this more frequently as opposed to just every other 6 months. So kicking things off, we've got center stage patron Surian Taylor with a really profound comment that I felt is just way too good not to share. The only way this is enjoyable is if you look at this through a campy lens. This film leans towards being very insensitive about mental health issues in teens by prioritizing Ben Platt's performance over the message that it markets towards consumers. Looking at it from a campy lens and thinking of Ben's overperforming, Evan's opportunistic manipulative actions, the uncanny valley, all of Sincerely Me, the direction to look like a Netflix/Lifetime hybrid, then you'll have a fairly funny movie. But unfortunately, the stage show tried really hard to be taken seriously, and the movie destroyed all of that work. And I agree completely. It's kind of like if you go back to watch the first episode of Star Wars with Qui-Gon Jinn, and you just take it from the approach of, oh, okay, he's the bad guy. Then it changes the entire series. And then piggybacking off of that thought and hopping over to who responded to me on Twitter, @WaitWings, in a review that they wrote and linked to me, and I'll link it in the description, @Innovade27 said, "Still absolutely pissed they cut Anybody Have a Map and Good For You. I can kind of see why Good For You wouldn't fit with the more realistic framing of the movie. I don't know how it's performed on stage, but I kind of imagine since it's like an ensemble thing, it's all three of the actors kind of coming in and doing their bits. But since they'd all be in different settings in the film, it wouldn't really work unless they cut to them singing angrily by themselves or something. I think that Good For You would have fit the realistic framing a lot better than Sincerely Me did. But in the stage version, Good For You is kind of a lot like how they did Requiem. And they figured out how to do Requiem for the movie, so I think they missed a really great chance to do more of that style of filmmaking with Good For You. And it's also just the thing of, that's the climax song, and that's where everything falls apart, and that's where the consequences of Evan's actions are felt. It's like taking out memory from Cats. It's like, where do you go from here? That's what everything is leading up to. All the way up to Evan getting on a tire and flying out of here. And then center stage patron Sebastian Canino of Cinemageddon Review says, in a very long thread, which you can read on my Twitter, and you can also just subscribe to his channel. He has a really great video on Dear Evan Hansen that he made. The movie isn't the worst in terms of content, but it's so bland and forgettable that you will not have a good time sitting through it or even talking about it. It may not be as problematic as its source, but it still is. But where it once was a mess, now it's just boring and lame. And this ties in to my final thoughts. Dear Evan Hansen, I've decided, after talking it out, was a pretty bogged down film that had a lot of great moments. However, sadly, those really great moments weren't enough to save the movie. Was it the dumpster fire that everyone was saying it was, or that it was going to be? Not at all. And it's like I said, I really didn't hate it. So if you love the show, you're gonna love the movie. If you hated the show, you're gonna hate the movie. But I think we can all agree on one thing. It's absolutely incredible that I'm only 3 years younger than Ben Platt. So have you seen Dear Evan Hansen? Are you gonna go see it? Are you not gonna go see it? Comment your thoughts below. I'll be responding to comments for the first hour. Since this is such a controversial and polarizing topic, please be kind in the comments. If you liked this video, be sure to click the like button so hard that it has to be in a cast for months. And then it also has to make a face like this. And remember to live truthfully in those imaginary circumstances, and Chester sends his love.